Alright, peace and greetings, YouTubers. So welcome to another edition of In the News. Hopefully you all have been having a great summer. Mine has been very eventful. Lots of shenanigans, but good things as well, so it's been a great time. And look, my summers don't end until it gets cold outside. I know a lot of people say summer ends once you get into September, but F that, okay? It's summer over here until it gets cold outside, which is usually about mid-October-ish, usually around the time it's like Howard Homecoming. After Homecoming, it usually gets cold. And then that's when I'm in the house. So don't invite me nowhere, because once we get into that space where it's the lows of like 20 and 30 degrees, I'm not coming outside. Don't invite me to nothing outdoors. I won't be there. I will be at home under my weighted blanket with my snacks, probably watching like the WYD channel, watching them episodes where it's the person that kills their spouse for an $8,000 insurance policy. I'm like, what kind of backwoods nonsense is that? But anyway, so hopefully you guys have been having a great summer. For those who follow the book club, our next selection will be What the Fireflies Knew by Kai Harris. And so we'll do the first 3 chapters on September 26th. For those who are interested, pretty much we just do it on Zoom. I'll post the Zoom link on my community tab closer to the actual date. And then all you got to do is click in and then we just chat and talk about the book. All right, it's a great time. There's no, membership or anything you need to sign up for. You just show up. And usually we have some really great discussions and it's really a great time. So if you're interested, that will be the book we're reading, What the Fireflies Knew. You can get the hardcover version. You can get it on Audible if you're somebody whose eyes kind of dry out when you look at pages for too long. Audible is a great resource. And so yeah, we will follow up with that. Now, before I jump into my heavier stories, I did want to start with some comedic relief, mainly because there's a whole bunch of foolery going on. So I would like to at least start off with a laugh or two before we got to get into the other things. So let's go to the clip. Lord, listen, kids will have you looking all kind of crazy in public and be totally oblivious about all of it and think it's all a game. Like, man, in all reality, if she wanted to just lay there and cry for a few minutes, I would have understood. I would have not judged. So listen, just go ahead and cry and let it all out. We understand. Because, man, little man had her going through it. She was fighting for her life, for real. But really, what got me, it's not even the fact that she fell. The part that got me is the fact that she thought she could take a toddler to a fashion show. And he was actually going to sit through the whole thing, okay? You can't even take kids to the movies. They will not sit still. Like, have you ever taken a 2 or 3-year-old to the movie? Never again. Like, I remember the last time I did that, it didn't matter how 3D animated the film was, how much popcorn you give them, how much soda they get, how much juice, candy. Give it 10 minutes. They're going to be climbing on the seats. Then they want to climb on you. Then they want to do a cartwheel. Then they got to go to the bathroom. Then they want to know when we're going home. Then they want to remind you about a toy that they saw at Target that you said you were going to get 5 years ago, but they're only 2, and somehow they done pieced it together and math ain't math. And like, I'm not doing it. And it does not help. Gravity is never your friend when you need it. Gravity will have you tripped up. And literally, it had old girl tripped up. I wanted to tell her she was leaning too far to the front when she was running. So you saw the fall coming. Like, you saw it in slow motion. And again, little man is oblivious to all of this. This is just game time for him. I knew it was on when he looked back at her and smiled and then ran. I was like, oh, it's game time for him. And so I always just think back, like, it was always a challenge for me to like chase after like my little cousins and stuff when they were that size, because I'm all legs and no torso. Like, all legs, no height. So it's hard for me to get down there, okay? Like, I don't know. My mom messed up the genes. My dad was 6'1", but she was only 5 feet. So I got my dad's legs, but I got my mom's torso. So, if you stand me next to somebody who's like 6'1", 6'2", our hips are at the same place. But once you get to that torso level, it's like nothing was there. So if you were to follow me from the feet up, it's like, oh, he has potential to be 6'5". No, he's 5'8". Okay, cool. And so literally trying to get down there and get a child, I understood the struggle. It just wasn't going good for her. But man, kids will always have you looking crazy in public and be totally oblivious. And it's so funny because they'll cut up in public, but then when you need them to perform, when you give them an audience, when you give them the floor to cut up and do something, they want to freeze up, okay? It's like the little kids in church that used to always cut up. That one kid that always got kicked out of Sunday school, wasn't allowed to go to children's church because they was always fighting other kids. They weren't allowed to be in the kids' choir because they were spitting on the other kids. They had a special seat at the church. They sat by like the church mother or one of the deacons or somebody. And so they get all year to cut up. And finally, when it's time for Easter and they got to do that Easter speech, the one time they're giving the mic and it's like, go for it. They want to freeze up. They start crying. They put their hand over their face and all this. You just feel like, okay, keep that same energy next Sunday. You know what I mean? But man, I'm going to tell you where she messed up. I was looking at the clip, right? take a look at old boy's shoes. They're very nice, by the way. But look at old boy's shoes. See, this is what happens when you always want to dress up your 2 and 3 year old like they're 26. You should have gave them some of them light up shoes with the siren, and I'm gonna tell you why. Okay, my parents used to make me wear those, and I used to be so mad because I was still wearing like the light up shoes, and I was like 7.5. And at that point, the other kids were starting to wear like all the cool shoes, so I was getting fried up at the playground. But anyway, you know, the light up shoes with the siren. It was like every time you took a step, they would make the noise. Joom, joom. And it would be so terrible because you can never play hide and seek. Like, even if the kid was counting behind a tree and you're going to hide, they could hear where you were going. So you could never win. You'd always be it and have to count all day. But anyway, the point that I'm making is, listen, had he had them shoes with the light ups and the sirens, the minute he would have took the first step, she would have noticed he wasn't where he was supposed to be. Because if you look at the clip, clearly she didn't realize he had got away until he was already at the runway. That's why she was trying to run to him. See, had he took that step with the light up siren shoes, she would have heard that first, ding! She would have looked, had that armor reeling back the sound. But no, folks always want to do the most. It is what it is. But man, kids are so funny. They will have you looking crazy in public. And I'm somebody who does not yell at children in public because you're not about to have me looking crazy. Absolutely not. Even the kids I work with, they knew Mr. Michael does not yell in public. So just understand, he's going to get you together once we are out of the public eye. But do not embarrass him because it will go down. I remember this one time, and I know I'm ranting, but you know what? We haven't done it in the news in a minute. So sit back and enjoy. If you don't want to hear my story, just go to the timestamps, go to the next story. Anyway, we had this moment where it was like this teen leadership career week, and we took all the teenagers to all these different places, right? Different corporations and companies. And so one of the days we went to Volkswagen, like their headquarters in Herndon, Virginia. And mind you, this is not just like the regular Volkswagen car lot. This is the place where the people with the money go, okay? Because I did not realize like Volkswagen is like the parent company to a lot of the luxury cars that we always hear about, that you hear in entertainment and the rappers rap about. So like the Maseratis and the Bugattis and the Beamers, and I want to say Porsche and some of those other really fancy cars. And so we get to this place, and it's pretty much like a showroom. And it's like, even if you have money, you don't even just go there and buy the car on the lot. It's like you literally go, you do the contracts, they go and custom make the car, and it will be ready in 8 or 9 months. And they had like models of the cars 2 and 3 years out, because I think this was like 2015 or 16 or 17. I don't remember what year it was, but like they already had like the 2018, 2019 models out there. I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. And so these are like $300,000 and $400,000 cars and stuff like that. And so I had already told the kids, I was like, listen, we're going to go to this place. They're going to let us look at all these little fancy cars. We get to touch the cars, everything. Do not tear up anything, okay? Because these cars are expensive. We can't afford anything if we break it. And I am not going back into slavery to pay off any kind of debts y'all have to Volkswagen. So let us act accordingly, right? And so we get to Volkswagen, and, you know, the kids have free reign to go and just look at everything. It was really cool. You know, they have a really nice little headquarters, and so the kids are looking at all these fancy cars, and these cars got all kind of gadgets. They're not even making the cars with regular materials. The guy was like, oh, this is not even metal. This is like a carbon or something. I'm like, oh. Okay, cool, fancy. You know, this is something. Anyway, so I'm off in the distance, right? I'm talking to one of the people in charge, like somebody who's like a board member or some VP of something, some executive. You know, I'm trying to secure money for the center so that we can still operate in the next year. Next thing you know, literally the whole room is like shaking. It's like seismic activity. I'm like, I know we're not about to have an earthquake or anything like that. And what it was is one of my kids went to one of the cars because, you know, they let them turn the cars on and everything too. And these cars are all in the showroom. They turn the speaker up as loud as it can go on one of them cars. I mean, and listen, rich people cars they got sound systems. You can't even fathom how they operate. It's stuff you ain't never heard before. And so literally, the entire room is shaking. And it was just my luck. It was literally like the Ace Hood Bugatti song. And so I look over, and all I hear is, I woke up in a new Bugatti. And I look, it's like 8 or 9 of my teenagers just, ah! And mind you, I'm over here talking to the little VP person. All right, and so I just did a snap and look and everything. And I don't know how they heard my snap over like fussing, because that was the thing. I never yelled. I just snapped. Like I do a snap and look, and the kids were like, oh shoot, Mr. Michael can see us. But like somehow I just did a snap and looked at them, and all the kids were like, oh wait, turn it down. Because listen, I wasn't mad at them playing the music. Do your thing, because most likely we never gonna see these kind of cars again. But I don't need you to blast and blow out the speaker, okay? Because we can't afford to fix it. That's about 8 months rent over here. So act accordingly. Man, that was the funniest trip. It was so funny. I was like, they ain't never letting us bring any more kids over here again, all right? But man, kids are so funny. That clip just that brought everything out of me. Anyway, let's go to some stories. And then in music news, I see that they are making a Milli Vanilli biopic. And listen, I can't wait to watch that one. I know some of y'all will not care, but this is right at my alley of interest in regards to music-related conversations. And so I was looking at the promotional pictures, and so they did a really good job with the casting, especially whoever that is they got playing Rob. Like, that looks just like Rob. Rob is the one with the little blue contacts on. And so this should be really interesting. And when I think back to Milli Vanilli, like growing up, because I was so young when everything happened, I just remember they were the group that everybody kind of laughed at. Like, they were the group that kind of caught all the smoke. And so when I was coming up, I remember the In Living Color skits, and people always had jokes and comments about the two guys that really didn't sing their songs and so on and so forth. But then when you dig deeper into their story, it's like, okay, there's a lot of layers to this. This is really more so a conversation about how the music industry can always exploit different people. And, you know, sometimes even when people mean well, the ills of the music industry will come in and shake the table. So really, if there's smoke, that should go to anybody, in addition to the smoke that they got for not singing their songs. It should have gone to the Frank Farian guy. So let's backtrack. I'm not going to go super deep into this. But if you remember, Frank Farian was this guy from Europe, right? And he had aspirations to be this big, giant entertainer. He wanted to do music. But he didn't quite fit the mold of what the industry was looking for in regards to imaging. And so he decided, well, fine, I'm going to still make music, but I'm just going to have other people be the face of it. And so in the 70s, he started this really popular disco group over in Europe called like Bonnie M. And they were really huge overseas. They weren't really a thing in the US like that, but overseas they were huge, like Australia, Europe, you know, they were all over the place. And so they had a lot of monster hits and sold millions upon millions of records. But the thing about it was the group didn't really sing any of their songs. And then all of the lead vocals from the male vocalist was actually coming from Frank. And so he had the lead vocalist, you know, pretty much just lip syncing all of his songs. I forgot the guy's name. I know there's a Bobby, and actually let me look it up real quick. What's the guy's name? I don't want to be in here just telling y'all half truths. His name was Bobby Farrell. Okay, I was close. All right, so Bobby Farrell. They had Bobby Farrell like lip syncing all of Frank's vocals, and so he never sang anything. And they would go on stage and do whatever, and he would do his little Bobby. If you've ever seen him, he just has this very unique version of dancing. All right, and so sadly he passed, I think, in 2010. And so you know that was a really huge group. Then we fast forward some years later. You know, Frank is ready for his next endeavor. And so he finds these two guys, Rob and Fab. And mind you, the two of them had no interest in doing music. They were trying to be models. Like, they're over there in Europe, and they just want to be seen and do that thing. And the thing was, they were broke. Didn't have any money. And so here comes Frank with this opportunity. Like, yeah, y'all just do some work for me. I'm going to pay y'all. And they're like, okay, sure, yeah, we want to get paid. And again, you know, they're starving artists. Well, not even artists, starving models, all right? And so they're like, yeah, we'll get into this. And before you know it, they got them in the studio, or not even in the studio because they didn't have to sing anything, but have them doing like promotional work. And next thing you know, they're put out on the road as Milli Vanilli. And so you had this group of older entertainers actually singing their songs. There's like 4 of them. You know, these people that are in their, you know, later 30s, 40s that are singing the songs. And you have Rob and Fab lip syncing to everything. And so the original Milli Vanilli, as far as the real vocalist, record all of the material, record all the albums, and then Frank puts Rob and Fab out there as the face of Milli Vanilli. And so they release these songs, and these songs are massive. So it's like Blame It on the Rain and Girl, You Know It's True. There's another song about something about Forget My Number. Dun, 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 you can dun, my number. I don't remember the words, but you know what I'm talking about. And there was like this other slow song that was out there. And you know, they went on these massive tours and sold a lot of records, even won a Grammy, right? And what's crazy about Girl, You Know It's True, and I was talking about this a few lives back where I was saying, I remember always hearing multiple versions of the song. I always heard the Milli Vanilli version because that was the really big one, but there was a smaller, low-key version that used to be played at a lot of house parties because my parents still used to party back then. And so one of you guys in the comments cleared it up for me, but there was like a group out of the DMV. I want to say Baltimore. Baltimore, I know y'all don't claim DMV, my bad. There was some folks from Baltimore, and there was this group called like New Marks, and they had the original version of the song first. Like, it was released way before the Milli Vanilli version, and so that was the version that found its way at all the house parties and stuff. And then later down the line, Milli Vanilli came out and, you know, took the song to another place, and it became bigger. And so, yeah, what was always presented to me was like, okay, you know, they were touring, and then the record started skipping, and the vocal just, girl, you know, it's girl, you know. And then, you know, Rob ran off the stage, and the next thing you know, they're like, all right, we didn't sing our songs, guys. We just felt guilty. We can't lie anymore. And really what happened was the two of them already didn't want to work with Frank anymore to begin with. Like, they were sick of Frank. They were trying to get out of the contracts. They wanted to, if they were going to do music, they wanted to actually sing their own stuff or lines and stuff, especially Fab. Like, Fab could actually sing. He was like, I don't want to keep lip syncing. And then the other thing was, it was becoming very obvious that they probably weren't singing their songs because, especially Rob, like Rob had this very thick, like German accent, but then on the songs, he would sound like so smooth and cool. And the folks are like, wait a minute, that ain't sounding right here, huh? Okay, well, let's see here. You know, we just heard this acceptance speech they gave, and you wouldn't even think this is the same person. And so, anyway, they go pretty much, and they're like, Frank, we're trying to get out of this. We don't want to do this anymore. And Frank is like, why do y'all keep trying to mess up the money? You just shut up and lip sync. You just go up there, you lip sync the song, do your little high five, do a cartwheel, and get off the stage. What do y'all? Okay, you want to mess up the money? Okay, cool. Hey, guess what, everyone? They don't sing any of their songs, not a single word, and you idiots just gave them a Grammy. And so that comes out and it like blows up. They catch so much smoke, and it's already bad timing because a whole lot was already happening in the industry. It was like this is around the same time where you start having the lip syncing scandals with other artists. Martha Wash, they were taking her through it as far as all these different groups working with her and using her vocals, but then having models, lip sync to the songs in the videos and not inviting Martha on the song. So like all the CNC Music Factory stuff was going down as far as like Everybody Dance Now, and then even Black Box with like Strike It Up and Everybody. Those are my two songs too. I get down to some Everybody. And then at the same time, like Paula Abdul was being accused of not singing some of the songs on Forever Your Girl, and she had been sued. And I think that's the reason why she decided to sing Vibology live at the VMAs that year. She said that was the performance that ended her career. I don't think the performance was that bad. I just don't think she sounded good. And I think I like the song Vibology, but I do think it's a song that's very... You got to be in the mood to hear it. So if it's already being presented live and the vocal ain't good and it's just a whole lot going on, she got some smoke for that performance. I didn't think it was that bad. So even in that Whitney documentary where she was like, Paula's singing off key on record, I think Whitney's talking about Vibology. But anyway, and there was a whole lot already going on around that time, and so it was just bad timing, and so Milli Vanilli was Frank's cash crop, and when they decided to turn against him, he said, "Oh, I'm gonna show y'all," and so he ended that. And the interesting part is they ended up getting a record deal and coming out with another album where they actually did do the singing, because like I said, they ended up giving back the Grammy, like they volunteered to give it back and everything like that. But they ended up coming out with another album because Fab could actually sing a little bit. Like Fab could actually sing. Rob had a little ying around the house voice. You can kind of have him sing in the background behind Fab. But the issue was the label that they were on pretty much ran out of money, and so they weren't able to promote the album properly or even press and distribute it all the way, and it sold like 2,000 copies, and that was the end of Milli Vanilli. And sadly, Rob unfortunately died from an overdose in 98. But they have a very interesting story. Fab still, I think, tours, and he does a lot of like music licensing and other things, all around the world and stuff now. But man, it's crazy. There's a whole lot that goes on in the music industry. I'm telling you, it doesn't matter what artist it is, you're gonna find a story about them or something crazy that took place. So I can't wait to watch the movie. Even I think I just told y'all everything that's gonna happen in the movie. But that was an interesting watch. Like, man, VH1, can y'all bring Behind the Music back? Like, this is how I used to learn all this stuff. Like, I really want to say the Milli Vanilli Behind the Music might have been the first one I ever saw. If it wasn't Milli Vanilli, it was the Bangles or it was Tina Turner. It was one of them three, but I remember watching, and then every time Behind the Music came on, I was glued to the TV. Anyway, interesting. Also in music news, I see that The Weeknd has been catching a little bit of smoke because he unfortunately had to cancel one of his concerts shortly after it had just started. He's currently on the After Hours Till Dawn tour, and this is like the big giant stadium tour that he's on. He initially was trying to tour in 2020. Of course, COVID showed up and ruined everything for everybody, so this is kind of like the makeup tour. And so he was at the second extension of his show in Los Angeles. He's doing the show at SoFi Stadium, which is really nice. It's like that really big, brand new stadium that just opened in LA. And so he's doing the show. He's like 2 or 3 songs in, and his voice goes out. And so he announces to the crowd that unfortunately he's going to have to stop the show because he wants to be able to give the crowd the kind of show that they've paid for. And he says, we're going to try to reschedule and get it back, and I'm going to make sure you guys get your money back. And so, of course, it opens the flood wave of chaos, and people have been dragging him all day on Twitter. And I think in that moment, you're kind of at a catch-22. You know what I mean? You could either, one, just continue and press through and just sound terrible, and then everybody still lights you up because it's like, we paid all this money and you weren't even good. Or, like I said, you cancel and reschedule. But now the people are like, man, we spent all our money to come out here, and I had a babysitter for the child, and I flew in from Vegas to come to this, and you're just going to catch smoke either way. So it kind of sucks for him. Hopefully things align. I do know, like, he doesn't have any more shows until, like, September 20th or 22nd or something. So, hey, maybe he might squeeze in a replacement show somewhere in between. But as an artist, I think your voice is your instrument. If you lose the voice, it's hard to put on a good show. And the thing with The Weeknd, too, is, like, a lot of his catalog is sung at the top of his range. Like, he sings everything way up into the rafters on almost a lot of his songs. And so when I was watching the clips, because at first, the clip I saw that they had posted where they're like, oh, this is where his voice went out, I was like, oh, he didn't even sound bad to me. And then I realized the song is initially recorded like out of his chest voice in a different octave. He's singing like in his head voice in a lower octave and trying to adjust, and he was still kind of struggling a little bit. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. there's no way he was about to do this for 29 songs. Like, he wasn't going to be able to get away with doing that. So it makes sense. It's just, it comes with the territory. You know what I mean? It sucks when an artist cancels a show because you really want to see them and you're excited, but things happen. But I think as far as The Weeknd, the challenge that works against him is, like I said, a lot of his songs are recorded in a very high key. And so even if your voice is not 100%, even like your voice just being 75, it can be a gamble to go on a stage when you have everything written at the top of your range, and there's no guarantee that those songs are going to come out properly when you do it live. Plus, I will say concert settings are already a challenge in itself, especially when you're doing like big stadiums or arenas, because the issues with the sound. That's why they have like the earpieces that kind of block out some of the additional noise. And really in the earpiece, you normally only hear like the drums, maybe your bass line, a light chord or something to kind of guide you to keep you in key. And that's really all you can hear. That way it blocks out all of the echo and reverb that's going to come from the big giant stadium and the loud noise, because when you're in a space like that, your brain is automatically tricking you to try to sing more aggressively because you think you can't hear yourself, because again, it's so loud in there and you're trying to almost sing over the noise that you end up sounding a hot mess and everything. This is why like people can sound really good in the shower, like sound amazing, because it's just the shower and the music and acoustics, and then they're like gasping and coming up for air at a karaoke bar because now, you know, there's different entities taking place and they don't know what to do because there's additional sounds and stuff distorting how they hear themselves, and they think they have to sing stronger or louder, as opposed to if you're in the shower and it's just you and you're at peace and in this tranquility space and everything just aligns and all the notes come out perfectly. You go to a giant stadium and you automatically, with the loud noise and the 8-piece band and everything, it can be very easy to kind of blow your voice out because you're trying to do too much, which is why they give the artist those earpieces so that it can block out all of that and they can really only focus on giving, you know, the performance and singing the song in a manner that is appropriate and safe for their voice in regards to technique. But, you know, things happen. I remember watching this interview with Gladys Knight where she was talking about how, you know, back in the day when she was first starting out, somebody had set her down and was like, okay, this is your range. Yes, you can sing way out to here, but this is the healthy range for you. And if you have all of your songs written specifically in this key, you'll always have your voice. Because if you do too much way out here into the rafters, into these higher ranges and spaces of your voice, eventually your voice is going to blow out and you probably won't have a voice in like 20 years. And so Gladys took that advice and stayed in her pocket. And that's why, like, in her late 70s, Gladys still sounds really good. Her voice still has power behind it. The tone is still really good. The texture is still good. It's aged a little bit because she's in her late 70s, but she still sounds amazing. And so, yeah, that's one of the challenges with, you know, having a catalog that's way up there. If your voice goes out, ain't nothing you can do but call it a day. You know what I mean? Anyway, moving on. And then in regards to the allegations that have been made against Aries Spears and Tiffany Haddish, let me just say, I would hope that none of this is true because it's very disturbing in regards to what I read about. However, because on the flip side, there is a skit that has content that is just as disturbing as the allegations, and it involves the same people from the allegations, it's really hard to have that kind of hope. I'm going to speak in parables a little bit, mainly because this is the kind of content that YouTube likes to flag. But the two of them are being accused of gross negligence, a certain kind of battery, a certain kind of harassment, and a certain kind of abuse of a minor. And so when we get into the details, this stems from a skit that took place in 2013. It was like a video skit where they do kind of like the parody and put it out there. And so the skit, I'm not even going to say what the title is because that's disturbing enough, but it involved Aries Spears, Tiffany Haddish, and 2 children. And the overall theme behind the skit is something very just inappropriate. Just kind of think Chris Hansen, How to Catch a Predator type stuff, right? And so there's this skit that took place in 2013. And when I read the details of all the allegations and the lawsuits and what took place in the skit, it pretty much has the kids in these very compromising situations that would make anybody uncomfortable watching. I didn't even get to see the thing. I just read the details and was like, I don't even want to see it. Nope, I'm good. Apparently it's floating around the internet. I think it may have been scrubbed. I don't know. But just know, all of this is chaotic. Now, Aries Spears and Tiffany Haddish, their representation has said this is all bogus and shenanigans, and the mother's pretty much just out for money. And they've tried to sue a few times, but no lawyer would touch the case because there's no evidence and so on and so forth. But even with all of that, even if I put on to the side the allegations and I just focus on the skit, because that's what I'm going to bring my energy to, is the skit right now. That alone, just, if you read the details of what the heck took place, you're like, I don't even get how this is supposed to be funny. No one thought like, hey, this is probably a bad idea. And then even with the parents, I'm like, y'all didn't see like the casting call sheet and read what your kids were going to have to do and say, wait a minute, something doesn't add up here. Because I know if I have children in Hollywood, I don't care what celebrity it is, I'm going to be in the room. Like, y'all can call action. I'm going to be on the side. I'm going to be quiet, but I'm going to make sure that nothing crazy is happening to my children, especially if they're doing some kind of scene and there's only 2 or 3 people in the room. Absolutely not. And so when you read the details, it's just like, what the heck? And so some folks are trying to say, oh, well, don't go so hard on Tiffany Haddish because this is back when she was still trying to get on, and Aries Spears was somebody who carried weight and he was her opportunity into Hollywood. And I'm like, no, I don't want to hear any of that, because at the end of the day, there's a thing called integrity and there's a thing called discernment. And both Aries Spears and Tiffany Haddish are grown adults, and they recognize and know that the specific subject matter of what took place in that skit is not appropriate and is very questionable. And in addition to that, understand, every door that leads to opportunity is not a door you should be running into. Just understand, sometimes you're going to run through a door and there is no floor. You just drop. And I think she just ran through one where she just dropped. Because who in their right mind would read the script, read the details, read the synopsis of what's supposed to take place and think, oh yeah, let me sign up. This would be a great idea. Like, come on, folks got to think long term about what works and what doesn't. Like, and from what I read, like, even back then, because some folks might say, oh, well, no, we're just in a space now where everybody's too woke. But at the time of this, no, 2013 wasn't that long ago. I don't want to hear it. So I can't. Like, are you kidding me? And I saw some people say, well, really, it's just the system trying to take Aries Spears down as punishment for what he said about Lizzo. And I'm like, we're getting to a space where, again, discernment and integrity. Like, understand, yes, I definitely believe that there are powers that be that ensure that certain kind of folks do not get to escalate and climb, but I don't see Aries Spears as the person that they would go after, mainly because whenever they want to take somebody down, they're going to take down somebody that carries influence. And when I say influence against the status quo, meaning like some kind of prominent black entertainer or athlete or public figure that encourages black people collectively to go against the status quo, to understand the idea of economic prosperity for black people collectively, black liberation, all that kind of stuff. Those are the people they would normally take out. Not somebody like an Aries Spears, who, not to go and fry him up, he doesn't really carry a lot of weight or influence within the black collective or within society. Like, to be honest, most people don't really pay attention to Aries Spears until they go to YouTube and want to relive the nostalgia of Mad TV. And honestly, that's just because he was next to Deborah Wilson. And the reason I'm frying him up a little bit is because he's always doing some stuff I don't like. One, he's always saying some anti-black stuff all the time. I'm still giving him smoke for the time he said he doesn't work with black comedians and they can't come to his shows because black comedians are too one-dimensional and they only talk this, that, and the third, and they're going to offend his white audience. So I'm like, okay, I see what it is you're trying to go for. But then again, even in regards to the stuff that happened with Lizzo, you know, how they were saying, you know, he was literally at an interview having a conversation. Lizzo was not even brought up. And this guy decides he's going to bring her up and talk about how, you know, he's disgusted by looking at her. She looks like a bag of dog, you know what, so on and so forth. And for me, it's kind of like, you are one to talk. I will never be a person that goes in on people based on how they look, because like I said, anything can happen to anybody anytime. All it takes is one car accident that doesn't go well, and next thing you know, you're a 2 a.m. infomercial because you got half a face. So I will never spend too much time frying up how somebody looks, but I'll say Aries Spears was one to talk about Lizzo. I don't know why people keep going after that girl. She doesn't bother anybody. If you don't like her, you don't like her. But understand that she still should be in a space where she can just exist without always having to deal with some nonsense. So when people were like, oh, it's the system trying to take Aries Spears down because he talked about Lizzo. First of all, if we want to speak about the system don't like black folks. So what makes you think that a black man tearing down a black woman on a major platform would make him become somewhat of a person that gets punished? If anything, that's what the system would want. The idea of a black man disparaging a black woman on a major platform and then people endorsing it, that would be more so something the system would want if we want to talk about the system. But understanding, like I said, if the system wants to take somebody down, they're going to take somebody down that goes against the status quo. So we could talk about, like, I don't know, the 6 people from Ferguson that mysteriously all died, as far as the initial activists that kind of kicked off the anti-police brutality movements, where you saw one of them hung, one of them shot, one in a car that's burned up. Those are the people that something like a system would take out. Not Aries Spears, the guy that a lot of us have not really paid a lot of attention to since like 2002, 2003. And again, this is not to go after Lizzo, but Lizzo doesn't even carry that kind of weight in the industry in regards to ending somebody's career, because again, the industry will get rid of you when they want to. They were just trying to get rid of her 2 or 3 months ago because of whatever lyric was on her album. So let's not get carried away. Like, again, remember what they did with Janet, okay? She was an industry darling until that Super Bowl, and they got her out of here. Thank God for black folks that kept her culturally relevant for the next 15 years and helped her to stay relevant and tour and do everything else, because white America was done with her, if we want to be honest. And so all of this is just very disturbing it, and I'm just like, man, sometimes you just need some discernment with what it is you decide to harp on to in regards to opportunities. And so when folks kept saying, oh yeah, it's the system trying to take him down, no, it's not. He's not even on their radar. Okay, it's kind of like when you go to one of those really small towns with a population of 12. I don't know, I'm gonna make up a town. Dustville, Alabama, right? And you get to Dustville, Alabama, and they got some big old billboard that says the terrorists are coming, ISIS is coming, you know, don't let the so-and-so, like, and it's kind of like, yeah, I'm sure the terrorists can't stand America, but I don't think y'all have to worry about them blowing up your town because y'all only got 3 buildings. It's not going to be worth the ammo and the money spent on the bombs. So I think y'all will be okay. If anything, folks from the major cities should escape to your town for safety. But, you know, I'm just like, all of this is very disturbing. I would hope that this is all untrue and I can eat my words and come back and be like, all right, y'all, I had it wrong. I would hope that that's the case. But again, that skit is something that you can't even defend if you read the details on it. We'll see how this goes. They got their work cut out for them on that one. And then I got a chance to watch the Edward Buckles documentary entitled Katrina Babies. And it's a really good watch. It's also pretty quick. It's about an hour and 20 minutes. It's on HBO Max. And it's pretty much a documentary that tells the experience of those affected by Hurricane Katrina. But the catch is, it's through the eyes of the people who were children when it took place. And so it just gives you some great context and, again, perspective into what was taking place during that time. One of the things I thought that was really brilliant with the editing, and I guess I'm giving spoilers, but I always say, like, a documentary you can't spoil. It's real life, but whatever. One of the things I thought was brilliant with the editing is when they had some of the transitionary scenes or even some of the scenes where somebody would narrate what was taking place, for the visuals, what you would end up seeing are these hand-drawn pictures of what was being talked about, but the pictures would look like they were something that a child would draw. And so I thought that was very creative because it helps you to kind of see everything through the eyes of how children would have saw it. I thought that was so brilliant. And so one of the parts that got me just from jump, right, was there's a portion where Edward is talking about going to his cousin Tina's house, or maybe it was his aunt. I can't remember if it was Aunt Tina or Cousin Tina, but long story short, Tina's house was the place to be, and that would be the place where him, all the cousins and the relatives, they would all go and gather and just have them a ball. They'd play outside all day because Cousin Tina's house was the fun house. You know, she was the fun relative to go to. So all the cousins would go there. They would remember the smells of the food, the laughs, the conversations, play outside all night, all day till the streetlights came on. Then they'd go in the house and play video games. And you remember, like, some people have this experience. Like mine, it mirrored, for me at least, my experience in Savannah, Georgia during the summers where we would all be at grandma's house and we would make cots on the floor with our blankets and pillows and stay up all night eating snacks and stuff and pray that the roaches didn't come out. And so, you know, he's talking about all that, but at the end he says, and then when we all went home, none of us knew that that would be the last time we'd be at Tina's house in that capacity. And I was like, man, that one hit me right there, because I think that's so many experiences. And it even reminds me of, there's a meme that's been floating around for years where it's like, one day you and all your friends went to the playground and hung out and you didn't realize that was the last time you were going to hang out. I was like, dang, that really is life. But at least in that context, that's more so because you all just grew up and went into different spaces. In Edward's context, it's because a storm came in and took everything. And so I think it just makes you think about what it's like to lose everything. You know what I mean? Like, can you imagine if a storm comes in? It's not even just about buildings being damaged or the town having to rebuild, but the fact that the entire life gets sucked out of the area. You know, people get displaced, people pass on, the culture in some spaces dies or gets repurposed, the sounds are no longer there, the smells of your favorite restaurants and bakeries and stuff in the neighborhood are all gone, the sounds of whatever neighbor used to always have their music blasting when they washed their car, like all of that, it stops. And so I'll always say Hurricane Katrina was something that really helped to shape and shift my view of how I saw America in regards to how black people are treated. You know, I think there's been a whole bunch of moments, like Trayvon Martin for me is really like what was the defining moment where I was like, okay, I understand that there's no allies in this. There's no friends in this. It's you and your collective, and y'all gonna have to figure it out because ain't nobody gonna be out there for, like, nobody has your back. Like, Trayvon Martin, that was my wake-up call. You know, before Trayvon Martin's situation happened, I still had hope for America in regards to, like, black people having an opportunity to at least have prosperity without having to deal with anti-blackness and all that kind of stuff. But Trayvon Martin kind of killed that in regards to what happened. I was like, after I saw that, I was like, okay, so Trayvon Martin was a moment. You know, learning about Central Park 5 and what happened with them was another moment. Everything in regards to Ferguson and even with Baltimore and Freddie Gray was another moment. You know, the rise of white nationalism over the last few years and the fact that folks are so proud and in regards to what has happened in our politics was another moment. But Hurricane Katrina was really that first one that kicked the door in. And I always remember because Hurricane Katrina happened a week before I started my senior year of high school. And so when we got to that first week of school, it was still in the news because they were just now getting people off of their roofs. You know, people had been sitting on the roof for days. People had been dying and starving and drowning and everything else. And folks that had diabetes couldn't get in. So it was all kind of crazy stuff. But I just always remember being Mr. Hamblin's class. That was the name of the teacher. My contemporary world issues class. And so we're talking about Katrina, and mind you, it's a class where it's like me and maybe one other kid that's black. Everybody else is white. And just having to hear the commentary of my classmates, that's when I realized, okay, we are not the same kind of people at all. Because, you know, everybody was like, well, why didn't they get out? They had time to evacuate. Like, it was just hearing all these white kids talk all this stuff. You wanted to fight every last one of them. It's one of the reasons why I had no interest in going to the 10-year reunion for high school. I'm like, F all of y'all. I'm good never seeing most of y'all ever again. But, you know, the thing about it was the conversations that people were having in the classroom. And mind you, I'll give it to Mr. Hamblin. He was firing up some of the kids like, no, you guys are just being really entitled and spoiled. I'm like, okay, all right, at least I got one teacher that got my back here. But, you know, hearing the commentary and the criticisms, and really a lot of their viewpoints were like, they were kind of just regurgitating things they already heard their parents saying. And some of it was things that they honestly felt internally as well. So I'm like, wow, the world is a terrible place here. But, you know, the thing about it was like, I felt so connected to the people that were there, even though I was so far away and didn't know any of them. Something about that kind of just opened my eyes and helped me to understand that, okay, collectively, yes, we are not a monolith. We all do things differently. We all have our own viewpoints, our own customs and cultures, but we all live under the same system of anti-blackness. And so that's the one thing that brings us all together, no matter how much we want to stray away and try to be unique and, oh, I'm a free thinker and I'm this, that, and that. All of that comes right back under that umbrella of anti-blackness. We're all going to get treated the same way, no matter who it is, what you have, or where you come from. And so that was that moment where I felt so connected. And so for me, I was just so enraged because I remember just watching for days as there was no help coming. Nothing. There was no food being, I mean, they literally just had the people sitting out there for like 2 or 3 days. And so I just remember being so frustrated and mad because I couldn't do anything about it. Like, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I'm like 17. It's not like I can vote or anything yet. You know, I don't have any money or anything like that. And at that time, you know, everybody's church and stuff was donating clothes and everything else like that. But you still felt like it wasn't enough. And you felt so disappointed because you would think like, you just knew like if this would have happened in Fairfax, Virginia, you know, oh, they would have had all kind of rescue teams and, you know, if this was Bel Air, you know, if this was the Hamptons, if this was Levittown, oh, they would have had all kind of help coming. And so to just see so many black people, it just, you know, babies crying and so it just, it's one of the reasons I ended up going to Howard and studying political science. Like, after that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to be a politician. I'm going to go be a senator. And political science was my major. And then about 2 years later, I was like, all right, you know what? I don't think I want to be in politics, but we'll make politics out of minor and go into something else. I've had no interest in being in politics for years, but in that moment, I was so stressed. And I think what irritated me was like, there was such a lack of empathy coming from so many people who were judgmental, like, especially when people kept saying, well, why didn't they get out? And I'm like, you realize, by the time they announced the mandatory evacuation, because at first they didn't want the people to panic, they announced the mandatory evacuation on the 28th. The storm came on the 29th. So it wasn't until the 28th when the storm had reached Category 5 status where they're like, oh, okay, this is a big deal. We're going to have to get y'all out of here. But by then, it's already too late. And so you had literally 100,000 people who were trapped in the city. And so, you know, they had to sit in the storm 145 miles per hour. And then the levees break because, again, conversation about infrastructure and how we do not spend our money making sure infrastructure is good. That's why we see what's happening with Mississippi and Jackson in regards to the water. Because, again, a lot of the people in power, all they want to do is give tax cuts to the rich and focus on the rich. And then the things that the people actually need, they never want to have money for. They want to have money to blow up everybody across the water and money to keep rich people wealthy. But then when it comes to things that the people actually need, it's always some BS. So then you watch the levees break. You watch people get flooded out of their houses. And then, again, the media, you're calling the people refugees. And then all of a sudden, now they're looting because you're seeing people going into grocery stores and taking food as if any of the things in these stores are going to be, you know, able to be sold. They're going to throw all that out anyway. But it was just like, man, you saw the double standards in how black victims of the storm were treated in comparison to white victims of the storm. Like, I was hot. It was just, oh, that was a time. I didn't mean to make this about me, but it just struck a nerve just going back and reliving all that. Like, it really just, it opened your eyes to just realize there was so much wrong in the world. And within the documentary, you know, they really do a great job of just talking about the experiences of the people and what life was like afterwards and moving into new cities and not really fitting in. Because, again, you know, imagine you leave town, because some people were able to get out. You know, you leave town to evacuate thinking you'll be back in a few days. You pack clothes for 1 or 2 days, and then you don't return for years. Like, that's an experience, and that was one of the critiques I had in regards to people who always had so much smoke to say about evacuating. Understand, if there's something like a mandatory evacuation that's thrown out there, people need time to get out. And the less time that's given, the more of a challenge it is for people who may not be in a financial state to just get out and go. Not everybody has a car. Some people have relatives that need to stay plugged up to different machines and everything like that. People have to take all that into consideration. Even the loan sharks and greedy people at hotels that hike up the prices when it's evacuation time and everything like that. And not everybody was in a capacity to get out. Some people had jobs that were so terrible. It's like, oh, no, you still coming to work. You don't show up. You won't have a job. Like, all those kind of things to think about. And so just the lack of empathy that existed from so many people, it just makes you want to throw hands. And the crazy part too, like when I got to Howard, like the next year, like there were a lot of people in my class that were from New Orleans. They can tell you the stories about sitting on the roof for a handful of days and how hot it was. How, you're sitting on your roof, you got to think there's no shade, there's no trees, there's nothing, just the sun beaming down, and even getting the sunburns and the smells from the water as far as, people have died. And then there's gators in the water and all kind of different things. And you don't know when you're going to eat, and people going back into the houses and trying to just find some kind of food that they might be able to eat on. Like, it was an experience like, man. And that's just Katrina. Like, again, natural disasters happen all the time. But with that one, it was such a major letdown because so many of the atrocities that took place could have been prevented had the people higher up really just been more considerate and done their jobs and had a more, moved in more of a sense of urgency in regards to what was happening. And then even the part in the documentary with the FEMA trailers where you had like 500 FEMA trailers that were given out to different families and they lived in the trailers, and then it turned out that the trailers had formaldehyde poisoning 40 times the legal limit. And so some of the people who lived in those trailers still have health conditions today, cancers, all kind of stuff. It's just like, man. So definitely check it out when you get a chance. I know I did not mean to go into this moment of reflection, but it just struck a nerve. Katrina, that was a moment right there. Woo. Anyway, moving on. I also got a chance to watch the movie Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul. And I'm going to say it was a very interesting watch. I didn't really know what to expect because I was confused by the trailer when I first saw it. So it stars Sterling K. Brown and it also stars Regina Hall. And I was entertained. It took a minute for me to understand what was happening because I was just about to turn it off. And I was like, oh, excuse me. Hold on. We're going to see where this goes. But, some folks really are not happy about it. They're like, oh, it's a mockery of the black church. And folks have all these viewpoints. I don't really see it as a mockery of the black church. I see it more so as a mockery of the egos that some people have who are in power in many black churches. And because of their ego comes the downfall because they can't get over themselves or they continue to do things that are absolutely terrible and try to cover it up. And then boom, everything comes all out in the open. That's what I saw it as. And it's no secret that we've seen that take place in many churches. And so I think sometimes there are some conversations to be had. And even if it makes you uncomfortable, sadly, it is what it is. So I think people should at least give the movie a chance and hear, see what it's about. But, it was a very interesting watch. Like I said, I don't know if I would have pushed it and marketed it the way that it was marketed because it's almost like they tried to push it as a comedy. And it's a comedy, but I don't see it as one. It's kind of like a mockumentary style, kind of like The Office meets Reno 911, but maybe a little bit more serious. And I think it really dives into just the emotional battles that people have internally with lots of things that they're dealing with in regards to their relationships, how they see themselves, how they want other people to see them. I think it's an interesting watch. So check it out if you get a chance. If it ain't your cup of tea, it ain't your cup of tea. But, I thought it was very interesting. I would also give kudos to both Sterling K. Brown and Regina Hall. I thought they both did a great job. Especially, Regina Hall's really been showcasing that she can pretty much play any kind of role. The last few movies she's done in, the last few years and some of the different series that are featured that she's on, she's really been kind of getting it in as far as, her range as an actress. I think she's killing it. And Sterling K. Brown, like I said, he did a great job in that role. It's very interesting. I don't know how to describe it, but it was an interesting watch. And I think once you kind of realize what's happening, it kind of pulls you in a little bit because, like I said, I was just about to turn it off because I'm like, I don't think I have the patience to sit through this. But then it got interesting. I was like, oh, okay, interesting. But no, I think it does open a dialogue about many of the things that take place, especially in mega churches and especially with the Eagles. And again, this is not every church and this is not every pastor or his wife or so on and so forth. But I think we've seen a pattern with a lot of prominent individuals in those positions, and they do a lot of certain things and they literally get away with murder and continue with some of the things that they do. So I think this opens a dialogue. If it's not your cup of tea, it's not your cup of tea, but I thought it was an interesting watch. Anyway, moving on. So I want to close with Jackson, Mississippi, and please understand that what's happening in Jackson in regards to the water crisis that they're having is not something that's new under the sun, and it's also not something that's only subject to Jackson, Mississippi. You're seeing this all across the country, especially in areas that were once heavily redlined, and especially in areas that may be governed by people who don't care about the best interests of the people that they govern. And so I just want to read a few things here because there were a bunch of different pieces that I had been reading. This piece is coming out of the Washington Post, and so it states, experts say this crisis was years in the making, a result of inadequate funding for essential infrastructure upgrades and tension between leaders of this majority-black, Democrat-led city and white Republicans who run the state. Mukesh Kumar, who ran Jackson's Department of Planning and Development from 2017 to 2019, said the seeds of the water crisis were planted in the 1960s when white residents left the city in droves after federal courts mandated the integration of city schools. As the city shrunk, there was less money to fund schools and other resources. Middle black class families left as a result, leaving Jackson without the tax revenue it needed to upgrade its century-old water system. State investment would have helped close the gap, Kumar said, but state officials repeatedly declined to fund improvements, leaving the city to fend for itself, he added. It sounds like they're still fighting the same kinds of battles with the same lines drawn, instead of starting to prioritize what the people of Jackson need, said Kumar, who has since left Jackson to run the Waco Metropolitan Planning Organization in Texas. Jackson has struggled for years with water issues. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Michael Reagan toured the city's main plant last year to highlight what his agency called long-standing environmental justice concerns in historically marginalized communities. In March, the agency issued an emergency order stating that the city's water system presented imminent and substantial endangerment to residents and could contain E. coli bacteria. Last year, as President Biden campaigned for his infrastructure legislation, he said that never again can we allow what happened in Flint, Michigan, and Jackson, Mississippi. But Reeves and other officials have repeatedly opposed efforts to fund water treatment upgrades. State lawmakers sunk efforts by the city to raise infrastructure funds through a sales tax increase. During winter 2021, when at least 40,000 Jackson residents went weeks without running water, Reeves told city leaders that they needed to do a better job collecting their water bill payments before they start going and asking everyone else to pony up more money. In 2020, Reeves vetoed bipartisan legislation that would have provided relief to poor residents with past-due water bills, calling the idea free money. A 2021 bill that would have authorized a bond issuance to assist Jackson with making repairs and improvements to water and sewer systems died in the Republican-controlled State House Ways and Means Committee. All right, and then let me switch over to another article from the BBC, all right? And it says, Marshall lives in West Jackson in the U.S. state of Mississippi, a predominantly black and poor part of the city. He has no choice but to drink the tap water that Jackson residents have been told to avoid. When he turns the tap on, the water runs brown. He says it's been like that for about 8 months. And he has no choice but to drink it. Yes, ma'am, I've been drinking it, he smiles when we ask whether it worries him. I turn 70 later this month. Marshall doesn't have a car, so he can't get to sites where water is being handed out by the National Guard. He also doesn't have electricity or gas because of a recent fire in the house next door, which means he can't boil the water to help make it safer. Very seldom is it pure. Sometimes it's a little lighter, a little darker. In the bathtub, when I first turn it on, it always comes out as rust. Then it gets lighter. But every time, the rust comes first. Experts and advocates say what is happening in Jackson and towns like Flint, Michigan, where the water supply has been contaminated with lead, is a direct legacy of generations of discrimination and segregation. This is a deep-seated, decades-long, in-the-making kind of situation, says Ariel King, a lawyer and environmental justice advocate. I think the history of racial segregation and redlining in this country have deeply contributed to the environmental injustices we see right now. Redlining began in the 1940s as a government-sanctioned practice of denying mortgages and loans to people of color, black people, I don't know why I always got people of color everything, because they were deemed too risky. The program lasted more than 40 years, and as a result, Ms. King says low-income, predominantly black communities were concentrated in areas with polluting industries like landfills, oil refineries, and wastewater treatment plants. And those areas, she notes, still exist today. She points to parts of the country like so-called Cancer Alley as an example. Once the home to Louisiana's sprawling plantations, the area along with the Mississippi River is now an industrial highway of more than 150 oil refineries and factories. For decades, the predominantly black residents have suffered from some of the highest rates of cancer in the nation because of pollution. The pipes have lead in them in Jackson, and so I would never drink a glass of water, she says. I don't brush my teeth with the tap water, but she admits that most people can't afford the $300 filter she bought. A water crisis like this doesn't become an issue until it affects people of a higher class. It has been ongoing, and Jackson has been an example of that. People's health is secondary to the state. And so the point that I'm getting at in regards to what you're seeing with Jackson, Mississippi, just understand that it's not isolated to just Jackson. This is something that's happening nationwide, and you're really seeing it in areas that were once heavily redlined. And recognize that the infrastructure in the United States is already falling apart because, again, there's just never enough investment. I will say I'm happy that some of the legislation that's being pushed is working to kind of fix some of that, but for decades it's been ignored. And now we're also in a space where our politics has become so tribalized and people are so spiteful. You have people in power that could care less about the people that they are supposed to govern. You know what I mean? It's all about lining their pockets up. It's all about doing favors. It's all about just holding on to power. It's not about ensuring that the country as a whole can do well or that different cities and towns can do well. And when you get to the state and local level, it becomes even more chaotic. And so you have people having punitive policy, trying to teach folks a lesson because of stuff they're mad about. Because when we throw in the conversation of anti-blackness, it gets even deeper than that. And so just understand, you're seeing the end result of years of redlining and a lack of investment. And when I'm talking about investment, just think about what happens like when you have areas that don't even have green spaces, no grass, no trees. Like, you need some trees to filter the air. It filters out all the toxins and everything like that. But again, I was looking at some of the research coming out of UCLA, and they were talking about how people that live in low-income areas are 4 times more likely to end up in the ER because of heat-related illness. And it's mainly because in a lot of those areas, there's no green space. There's no trees. It's hotter in that area than other parts of town. And because of that, the whole area is nothing but asphalt, glass, and metal. And then when we talk about, again, some of the zoning laws in regards to how close certain factories can be to certain areas, we recognize that when they started building some of these factories that put all the toxins into the air and toxins into the water, they weren't going to put them in the areas that were considered blue and green in regards to redlining. They were going to do it in the areas that were red and somewhat yellow. And so we fast forward, and you have issues with zoning, you have issues with where the factories were, how close they were to the people, and it also has to do with air quality. How close could the freeways be to certain neighborhoods? Of course, they're not going to build a freeway through a green or a blue neighborhood, but they'll do it through a red one. And so you're talking about the carbon emissions that are just sitting and floating in the air. You're talking about even the water systems and how clean the water is going to be in regards to the pipes, in regards to even the drainage when it floods. Where does the water go? A lot of times, let's talk about Houston. Where is the water going every time it floods? Into certain kind of neighborhoods, and we know which ones, okay? So there's so many layers in this conversation, all right? We're talking about even the investment in regards to gas lines. How many times do we keep seeing houses randomly blow up because the gas line and the pipes that hold the gas are so old? You know what I mean? Whole neighborhoods blow up, all right? So you got houses blowing up again. And again, even when you talk about regulation in regards to how much bad toxins can a factory put into the air, you know, the regulations, you're seeing things kind of be deregulated because, again, political favors are coming into power. This is why I always say money needs to be taken out of politics, because as long as you can pay people off, people have a price. Everybody has a price in regards to those in power, and it doesn't matter what it is, they will take a check at the expense of the people. And so there comes the deregulation, and then we fast forward, and you wonder why you got areas where there are higher cases of kids that have asthma, or people that have more cases of different kind of cancers, or infertility, or heart or cardiovascular disease. Like, there's so many things that take place, all because, again, it's all in the politics, and it works full circle. And it's not just some place like Jackson, like you saw it in Flint. And with Flint, what's so interesting is, understand, Flint at one point in time was a booming city, booming economy, especially during the industrial industry. But once the money and the greed came in and the factories closed and everything went and shipped overseas and everything, there came the divestment. Everybody got up out of there, all right? And once you start divesting from the areas, now there's less to go around in property taxes, less in taxes to help ensure that everything is upkept. And before you know it, they start cutting the funding from the school. They start cutting the funding from things that are in regards to public health. And then again, when we talk about just our politics in regards to some of the people in power, some people are so evil, they could care less if somebody is dying on the street. They do not care. They will not change any kind of policy. And so now we've seen this influx of hospitals all across the country closing because they're going bankrupt, because the governors didn't want to expand Medicaid into, you know, the different operations that would give people access to better health care, because again, they want to hold on to certain viewpoints they have, because they still got smoke about the black guy that was in office like 10 years ago. And so, you know, you're just seeing the nonsense. And so you see it in Flint, you see it in a place like Newark, New Jersey, you saw it in like East St. Louis, like all of these different cities where there are so many problems in regards to what's happening in the environment because there's divestment. The people in power could care less about the folks there. And then on top of that, there's often this narrative where it's like they just blame the people for what happened. Well, you know, like even with the thing we read, well, pay the water bill. You just need to pay the water bill. And you pay the water bill, they'll have money to fix the pipes. That's all you got to do. And really, you have the people going up against a system with no support, because the only thing that can take down a system is something from a structural standpoint. But the structure is so screwed up in regards to our politics, to the point where now this is why you have things like gerrymandering and voter suppression and making sure folks can't vote. And it doesn't help. We also got folks that are just over it and they've tapped out. And I don't like who was in charge of whatever at the White House, so I'm just not voting no more because it's some nonsense. And I'm like, listen, what does Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Obama or Bush have to do with what's happening at your school board meeting in your neighborhood? Or what does that have to do with the fact that they're voting as to whether or not they're going to build a freeway through your neighborhood, or whether or not they're going to deregulate about some factory that wants to open near your house, some kind of styrofoam plastic factory that wants to shoot out, you know, tons and tons of pollution into your neighborhood, and they want to go against the regulators to ensure that they can put it out even more, and you've decided you're done because you're still mad about something you didn't get. Like, it is man, don't get me started. And it's so funny, like, even now we're in a space where you have gentrification happening, right? So now white folks are moving back into these same areas that they once deemed undesirable, right? And it's so funny because in the areas where they're moving into, now you're seeing them try to build green spaces. You're seeing them try to clean up things. I always think of the Anacostia River here in DC. For years, everybody has known, don't even go over in the Anacostia River. Don't touch the water. You're going to come back with something. But now white people want to swim in it, so now they have all kind of resolutions to clean up the river. And what's so crazy is the resolutions have so much support. And I'm like, if you knew for how many decades the original people that were in Ward 7 and Ward 8 have been trying to clean up that river, and they never had support from the people up top, and now because you got some white folks that want some bike lanes that have moved in and they want to clean up the river, now all of a sudden there's all kind of money to go, and yeah, we're going to do this, and they got all kind of campaigns and commercials. I said, y'all be so full of it. But anyway, point that I'm getting at is everything works full circle. And so the end result of redlining, this is what we're seeing. And so recognize, people get mad because I'm always talking about race and racism on here, but it doesn't matter how much you want to ignore it. You can't escape it. Even if you're not on the receiving end of it from a structural standpoint, it will still be in your face, because that's the America we live in. And on that note, I'm out. Share your 2 cents, subscribe.
Get it!